I'm finally back. I'm in my new house. And before this video gets started, I just want to have a very important message out front. Many of you know that football and hockey are my two favorite sports. And I just want to say that this video is heavily inspired by Steve Dangle of Sportsnet, his trade tree videos. I love those videos, and I figured why not do it with the Broncos? And to be honest, I think this is the perfect trade to do. We're going to be talking about the Jay Cutler trade and how that eventually led to us trading for Russell Wilson. So I hope you enjoy. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. The support is greatly appreciated. And let's jump in to this video. Alrighty, the Jay Cutler trade rewind video. Now, as a kid, I think I was 5 years old when we drafted Jay Cutler back in 2006. And, you know, growing up as a Broncos fan when you're a kid, you don't remember all the players. So you think of one or two players that you really remember. For me, those players were my favorite player of all time, Champ Bailey, and of course, quarterback Jay Cutler. Now, I'm just going to set the scene here real quick. It's 2009. I believe we had just hired Josh McDaniels as the new head coach. And when we did hire Josh McDaniels, he tried to trade for quarterback Matt Castle from New England, as that's where he had just come from. Jay Cutler at the time said he did not want to be traded. However, after this move, he would end up requesting a trade, and a trade he would get. Let's break down this sort of trade tree, but let's really go into this rewind of the Jay Cutler trade. As always, I want to remind you that Jesus is king. I pray that you give your life to him. He's got a plan and a purpose for you. And I just truly hope you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior and believe with your whole heart that he died on the cross for your sin. And if you do that, you'll go to heaven. It's that simple. It's that easy. Of course, the decision is up to you. But as a Christian, I feel it's very important to tell people about this message and spread the gospel as much as I can. Now, let's jump into this trade rewind. As I mentioned, we drafted Jay Cutler back in 2006 with the hopes of him being our franchise quarterback. He only played 3 seasons with the Broncos, and in those 3 seasons, he played and started all 37 of those games. He ended up having a record of 17-20, throwing 762 completions on 1,220 attempts. He threw for 9,024 yards with 54 touchdowns to 37 interceptions. Now, he would request a trade, and eventually he would be traded. And here's what the trade looked like. We sent Chicago quarterback Jay Cutler and a 2009 fifth-round pick, which would end up being 140th overall. And the Bears would send us quarterback Kyle Orton, and man, this guy gives me nightmares. This was a rough period to be a Broncos fan with Kyle Orton as the quarterback. But they sent us Kyle Orton, a 2009 first-round pick, which would be 18th overall, a 2010 first-round pick, which would be 11th overall, and a 2009 third-round pick, which would end up being 84th overall. Now, let's start off with the Bears side because this side is actually pretty quick. They got quarterback Jay Cutler. He was there 8 years with the Bears before signing a 1-year deal in Miami to finish out his career in 2017. And in those 8 years, he had 102 games started and played. He had a 500 record of 51-51 while throwing for 2,020 completions on 3,271 attempts. He'd throw for 23,443 yards, 154 touchdowns, which is 100 more than he threw in Denver, by the way, to 109 interceptions. Then the Bears also got a 5th-round pick, 140th overall, where they would use that to select wide receiver Johnny Knox. He played 3 years in the NFL, all of them in Chicago. He played 45 games. He started 27 of them. He had 133 receptions for 249 targets for 2,214 yards and 12 touchdowns. And he actually made a Pro Bowl in his career, which is kind of odd. But that's it. That's where the Bears' side of this trade ends. They didn't trade Cutler. They didn't trade the pick or Johnny Knox at all. So that side is done. Now, let's jump over to my Broncos side as I am a Broncos fan. First up, we got quarterback Kyle Orton, who was with the team for 3 years. He played 34 games and started 33 of them. He had a record of 12-21, throwing 720 completions on 1,194 attempts. He threw for 8,434 yards, 49 touchdowns, and 28 interceptions during his time in Denver. And by the way, all these stats are only with the team when they were with the Broncos. So that's Kyle Orton. Now, what did we use with the 2009 first-round pick? Well, we would use it to select defensive end Robert Ayers. Now, Ayers would play 5 seasons with the Broncos, appearing in 72 games and starting 27 of those games. He would have 102 total solo tackles with 40 assist tackles for a total of 142 total tackles. He would have 26 tackles for loss and 37 quarterback hits. He would then go on to play with the Giants for 2 seasons, and then as well as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 2 seasons before calling it a career. Now, what did the Broncos do with that 3rd-round pick in 2009? Well, we actually traded it. We used that pick, and we sent that pick, which was a 3rd-round pick, 84th overall, and our other 3rd-round pick, 79th overall, in exchange for a 2009 2nd-round pick, which would be the 64th overall at the back end of the 2nd round, and a 4th-round pick, 132nd overall. The picks that we sent to Pittsburgh would end up being Craig Urbick and Mike Wallace. Now, who did we use, or what player did we select with that 64th overall pick? Well, we'd use it to select Richard Quinn, a tight end. And if you're saying who exactly, he did not do a whole lot with the Broncos. He was only in the league for 3 years, only with the Broncos for 2 of them. His final year was in Washington, by the way. He played in 29 games and started 4. He has no offensive stats, was mostly a special teamer. And only in his career, he has 7 solo tackles, 3 assist tackles, and for 10 total tackles with the Broncos. So a terrible pick by Josh McDaniels and that front office back in 2009. But with that 4th-round pick, 132nd overall, we would use it to select Seth Olsen, a guard, who also only played in the league for 3 years, only one of them in Denver. And during those times in Denver, he played in 3 games, didn't start any games. And yeah, so not very well with that trade right there. But moving on to the future, the 2010 first-round pick that we got from the Bears, which was 11th overall, we actually traded it to the San Francisco 49ers. We sent that first-round pick, 11th overall, in exchange for first-round pick, 13th overall, and a 4th-round pick, 113th overall. And what would we do with that first-round pick, 13th overall? Well, we would actually trade it again. We would give that pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. They would select Brandon Graham, and they would give us the 24th overall pick, the 70th pick, and the 87th pick in that draft. Now, what do we do with the 24th pick? Well, we would actually trade it to New England. We would trade that 24th overall pick to New England that we got from Philadelphia, and then we would trade that 4th-round pick, 113th overall, that we got from the 49ers to the Patriots. Now, the Patriots would end up trading that 24th overall pick again to the Cowboys, which would end up being Dez Bryant. That 4th-rounder, funny enough, is actually Aaron Hernandez, which, yeah, I mean, not a great guy. Not a great guy right there. Obviously went to prison for a couple murders, but that's not part of this video. We traded those picks for the 22nd overall pick in 2010. And who did we select with that pick? Well, it's one of the greatest players in franchise history, Demaryius Thomas, rest in peace, DT. He played 9 years with us, playing in 125 games, starting 111 of them. During his time in Denver, he had 665 receptions on 1,095 targets. He had 9,055 yards and 60 touchdowns with the Broncos. Now, what did we use that 3rd-round pick, 70th overall for? Well, we would actually use it to trade up with Baltimore. We would send our 2nd-round pick, 43rd overall, our 3rd-round pick, 70th overall, and our 4th-round pick, 114th overall, in exchange for the 25th overall pick in 2010. The picks that we sent away, our second round would end up being Sergio Kindle. The third round would end up being Ed Dickinson, and the fourth round would end up being Dennis Pitta. And who did we select with that 25th pick the 25th overall pick in 2010? Well, it ended up being quarterback Tim Tebow. Tebow only played 2 years with the Broncos, playing in 35 games, starting 14 of them. He would end up having an 8-6 record with the Broncos, throwing 167 completions on 353 attempts. He threw for 2,383 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. And I looked for the rushing stats, and I didn't see him on the website. And of course, you got to remember the Tebow's rushing upside. He'd always rush the football. So those are his passing stats, I believe. There's still a bunch of other rushing stats that I really couldn't fit onto the slide. You see how much room those stats took up. I couldn't add the rushing stats. But yes, with that 87th pick that we also got, though, it would be used to select wide receiver Eric Decker. And he played 4 years with the Broncos before eventually signing with the Jets on a 5-year contract. And then he would end up playing the last season of his career on the Titans. But with the Broncos, he played 62 games, starting 44 of them. He had 222 receptions on 362 targets for 3,070 yards and 33 touchdowns during his time in Denver. Now, we would end up trading Tim Tebow to the Jets. After those 2 seasons that we had Tim Tebow, we would actually end up signing Peyton Manning that offseason. And so, of course, we had no need for Tim Tebow. So we'd ship Tebow and the 7th round pick, which would be 232nd overall, to the Jets. That 7th round pick would end up being Greg Scruggs in exchange for a 4th round pick, 108th overall, and a 6th round pick, 188th overall. Now, what do we use those 2 picks for? Well, the 4th round pick, 108th overall, would end up being Philip Blake, an offensive lineman. He only played 1 year in the NFL, and that one season was with the Broncos. And yeah, of course, not a great pick there. But the 6th round pick would actually be a solid player for the Broncos. And that would end up being linebacker Danny Trevathan. He played 4 years with the Broncos before going on to play with the Bears for 6 seasons. But during his time in Denver, he played in 50 games, started 32 games, had 192 solo tackles, 149 assist tackles, and 459 total tackles. He had 19 tackles for loss, 16 quarterback hits, and 5 interceptions during his time in Denver, and was a big piece in helping the Broncos win Super Bowl 50 on that defense. Now, this is where it gets tough because back in 2019, we traded Demaryius Thomas to the Texans. We weren't competing. We shipped DT off. We shipped DT and a 7th round pick, which would be 220th overall, which would end up being Colin Gillespie. And we received a 4th round pick, 125th overall, and a 7th round pick, 237th overall. Now, what do we use those 2 picks for? Well, we actually used that 4th round pick to trade up. We gave Cincinnati our 2nd round pick, 52nd overall, would end up being Drew Sample. That 4th round pick, 125th overall, would be Renell Wren. And that 6th round pick, 182nd overall, which would be Travion Williams. And who do we select with that 2nd round pick, 42nd overall? Well, it'd be none other than quarterback Drew Lock. Drew Lock, of course, fresh on many people's minds. I'm still rooting for him in Seattle. Still one of my favorite players. Didn't work out in Denver, but he played 3 years with the Broncos, playing in 24 games, starting 21 of them. He had an 8-13 record. He had 421 completions on 710 attempts. He threw for 4,740 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 20 interceptions with the Broncos. Now, what did we do with that 7th round pick that we also received from the DT trade? Well, we'd use that to trade up. We would trade the 212th pick, which was a 6th rounder, and that 7th round pick to the Texans in exchange for 187, which was a 6th round pick. And as you can see, the 2 players that would end up being selected by the Panthers would be Dennis DeLay and Terry Godwin. Actually, I don't know if they picked those players. The picks could have been traded, but those are the players that were selected with those picks. And who did we use to select with that 6th-round pick? Well, it would be Juwan Winfrey, a wide receiver. He played 1 year with the Broncos, played in 3 games, no starts. He was drafted out of Colorado, never really panned out. He's currently on the Packers right now. But yeah, just Juwan Winfrey would be that pick. Now, this is where it all comes together. Of course, we traded Drew Lock this offseason, which is how the Russell Wilson ties into this trade. We give Seattle Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, a 2022 first-round pick, which would end up being Charles Cross, our next year's 2023 first-round pick, a 2022 second-round pick, 40th overall, which would end up being Boye Mafe, a 2023 second-round pick for next year, obviously, and then a 2022 fifth-round pick, 145th overall, which the Seahawks would end up trading to the Chiefs, and that would end up being Darian Kennard. And then, of course, we received Russell Wilson and a 2022 4th-round pick, which would end up being 116th overall. Now, who did we use on that pick, 116th overall? Well, that would be Ioma Uwazurike, a defensive end, and he's been solid this preseason. Of course, I'm not going to put preseason stats because those don't really mean anything in the long-term aspect of it. So we'll have to see how Uwazurike pans out. But that is so far the trade tree. Of course, this could expand in the future. You're going to have a first-round pick next year, which Seattle could trade or select. And the second round, which they could trade or select. And then any of these players could then be traded again to add on top of this. So, I mean, yeah, the players could be traded. Ioma Uwazurike could be traded. So this trade tree still has a lot to expand upon. But yeah, that is the trade tree so far. Let me know what your thoughts are. I worked really hard on this video, so if you could drop a like and subscribe to the channel, that would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a video very, very soon. Peace out.